The day has come. A day I never thought would come, but I kind of hoped would come, but then I kind of changed my mind, and then I didn't know. But regardless, the day has come for me to sell my Fender Strat. Now, for those of you who've been following Spells and Curses for a while, know, or probably even recognize this Strat very well. This is the guitar that I cut my teeth on professionally. This is the guitar that I did most of my tours on. The early years of Spells and Curses, right here. It's on If Only You Knew, it's on Wicked for Days. And anybody who's known me, anybody who's spoken to me about my guitars, knows that I have a love-hate relationship. I've had a love-hate relationship with this guitar. The sad part is that this story, this love story, is now over. So real quick, the specs of this guitar are pretty much stock. I've never done anything to this guitar. It's 25.5 scale length, alder body, maple neck, rosewood fingerboard, standard American tuners. Yeah, I mean, I think the pickups, I forget what they're called, but I don't think they're definitely not the noiseless ones, I'll tell you that. So before we could get to why this is all a really good thing, let me explain to you the story behind this guitar. Imagine a young rave, a little boy rave, looking for his first professional guitar. You go through a few that give you a nervous breakdown. Long story. And then one day, on a fateful trip to the Guitar Center in Manhattan, you walk into the store, see a Fender Strat, decide to play, and it's not this Strat, but it was a really good Strat. And then the sales guy goes up to you and says, hey, you know, I got one that's used that was sold to us by this girl who wanted to try to play guitar and then quit a week later, and you could try that one out and see if you like it. Okay, cool. Plop, they gave me this, I played it, and I liked it because at this point I was starting to really get into songwriting, and I needed a guitar that didn't overpower me as an artist. I needed a guitar that would help me in terms of finding my own voice, and I found that the Fender Strat was perfect for that, simply for no other reason than its versatility. I mean, it's got five pickups for you to choose from, 5 different sounds mixed with a tone knob, 2 tone knobs, and a volume knob. You can get so many different kinds of sounds from this guitar. So I got it, and it became my very first real guitar, whatever that means. And I started writing, I started recording, I did SUADADE, I did shows, I did open mics, and I had this with me, this guitar. But for some reason, the more I played it, the more I sort of had disagreements with it. Now, there's nothing wrong with this guitar. This is a Fender American Strat, and it is, I would say, just as good, if not better, than any Fender American Strat you will come across. It's a little heavier, that's the only drawback. For some reason, the alder that makes up this Fender Strat is a bit heavier than your run-of-the-mill Fender Strat. But for whatever reason, I was not connecting with the guitar anymore. And this is very early on into Spells and Curses. And then we started doing the SUADADE tour. And it was during that tour, you know, you're playing this every night. You're rehearsing with it, you're recording with it, and you're doing shows. When the shows happen, you don't really concentrate on the bad. You're trying to focus on the energy of the crowd and taking them on a journey. So during the show, everything would be great, but not as good as it could be, because I've played shows where it feels like the music is flowing through you and there's nothing impeding the musical energy. And for some reason, I wasn't getting it with this guitar anymore. And it was actually at the end of the SUADADE tour that I realized exactly what my issues were with this guitar. I had basically outgrown it in a way. My tastes changed. What do I mean by that? Well, when you look at a Fender Strat, you usually think of everybody who's ever played a Fender Strat. You think of Jimi Hendrix, you think of Jeff Beck, you think of John Mayer, you think of so many people, John Frusciante, you name it. I find that when I pick up a Fender Strat, I always, just when I'm just playing, just for fun, just for me, I always seem to do my best impersonation of those guys. I always seem to dial in their energy and not my creative voice and energy. And whenever I would find my creative voice and energy, which I usually find in the studio when I write the songs and record the songs, when I perform them, it doesn't come out of this guitar. The reasons for that is that I realize that I like necks that are wider. These pickups sound great, but I like pickups that are a little louder. This body, the craftsmanship is phenomenal, but it didn't speak to the artist that I felt that I was becoming. And that's why I made Stella, and that's a whole other video and story in and of itself. We'll get to that. But for the longest time, I always tried to figure out how to connect back with this guitar. It was my backup for a long time. Whenever I needed single coil tones, I'd use this, but then I'd find that I have other guitars that give me split coil single tones that I prefer a little bit more so in the recording. And you want to hear something really crazy? This right here is the first guitar I've ever owned. This is the guitar I cut my teeth on, period. not just professionally, just learning guitar. It's on this guitar. I prefer everything about this guitar to this Fender Strat. It's a wider neck. It's got louder pickups, but they fit what I do and what I want to do a lot better. And obviously, I have a very, very close history with this guitar. But this guitar I've had for over a decade now. So the real reason why I wanted to make this video was really for me, as a time capsule. That at one point in my career, this guitar was my guitar. Now it's going to be somebody else's. And by the time you're watching this, it's going to be in their hands, and hopefully they're going to be playing it and making a lot more music with it. It feels weird saying that, because for 10 years, this has been mine. It's a really personal thing, musicians and their instrument. It's an inexplainable connection. If you think of like a craftsman, a plumber, they have their favorite wrench. They have their favorite tool to get the job done. For the better part of a decade, when it came to live shows, this is what got the job done. I modeled all of my live tones with this guitar. Every pedal I have, I tested it out with this bad boy right here. As a musician, when you're trying to forge your identity, especially if you're a guitar player, your instrument is a part of that picture. When somebody thinks of Jimi Hendrix, they think of Jimi Hendrix with the Strat. You think of Slash, you think of him with his Les Paul. And I feel personally, for me, when I think of those early SUADADE days and definitely the first few Sinful Things shows, I think of the rave with this, and I have the pictures to prove it. It's weird because like I don't want to say goodbye, and I feel like I'm getting FOMO. And I was talking about this with the professor. He says, you've been wanting to sell this guitar for years, and I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay, so I'm going to show you exactly the text conversation I had with the professor, because he helped me sort of wrap my head around this situation. I basically texted him and I told him, hey, you remember my Fender Strat? Well, I got an offer for it. I don't like the neck. I'm not crazy about the pickups. I don't play it that often. I use it to record sometimes, but not a lot. And I'm very torn about actually selling it. Why is this? I've had it for about a decade. He's a guitar buff himself, and so I knew he'd understand. And he goes, it's because you have an emotional attachment to it, but it's not a functional attachment anymore. And you talked about selling it for years. That right there, it's not a functional attachment anymore. Blew my mind. Without getting into the deeper psychology of the rave, it really spoke a lot to me. Are the attachments in our lives doing anything to improve our lives? Are they helping us or are they hurting us? And obviously, it's never going to hurt owning a Fender Strat. But there are other guitars that I want. Dare I say, there are other guitars that I need. In a way, it kind of feels like you're getting in the way of somebody else's blessings by holding on to this, even though you don't really need to. And I don't need to. There are a lot of guitar collectors out there, and they like collecting. They like collecting. They will not sell no matter what. Some of them even think about guitars as like investment vehicles, and that's great. Me personally, I like to look at them as functional tools of the craft. My craft is songwriting and recording. For my music and the kind of music I'm writing and recording and playing, I have found tools that kind of do what this does, just a little better. In the interest of being somebody who uses all his tools and not having any tools just sitting in the shed waiting for their day, why not sell this to somebody who could make this a part of their tool shed? If you haven't realized, I'm basically just trying to justify going through with the sale. I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel like I'm gonna miss it. It's just, you know what it is? I think for me, it's the fact that I'm closing a chapter, a 10-year chapter in my life. This guitar, I've played so many gigs with. I've played some weddings. I've played pre-Spells and Curses shows where it was just me. It was just your boy in a coffee shop. I've done records. I've done demos. I've written songs. Vice Grip if only. There's no real reason for me to sell this guitar, except for the fact that I think that I'm evolving as an artist and I'm understanding more so what I want to say and sound like. And while a Fender Strat is in the equation, it's not necessarily this one. And there's an argument that can be made about Strats that you can mod, but at that point, I don't know, something about that just seems kind of backwards about modding this Strat. In my opinion, if you're gonna mod a Strat, you might as well custom build a Strat. I couldn't mod this Strat. I couldn't, because I'm not a fan of the paint job, to be completely honest with you. It doesn't say the Rave anymore. It says the Rave circa, whenever I bought it. This is a 2008 guitar. I really kept my guitars in good condition, I must say. Moving forward, if I were to get a Strat, how would it differ from this one right here? Well, for starters, I would have a wider neck. Maybe thicker, but definitely wider. I got big hands, I need a big neck. I would do something about the pickups. I'd make them more output, thicker. I would mess around with the placement of the knobs. That's a problem. I would definitely do something about the bridge. I don't know, I've really gotten into floating bridges recently, and I tried to make this a floating bridge. It's just obviously it does not work the same way, obviously. Kind of, but not really. If we're gonna go all Marie Kondo on it, when I pick it up, does it spark joy? The answer in truth is no. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't suck to play. It's just that it's not a guitar that I would play for an extended period of time. It doesn't sound bad. So what I wanted to do here is document some of the tones that I crafted live anyway for the Spells and Curses live shows. Back when live shows were a thing, you remember that? I wanted to walk through them. That way, moving forward, I would know if this was a mistake or not. One thing I will give this guitar credit for is that it taught me the value of the middle pickup, and I've been using the middle pickup exclusively for pretty much any kind of like effect heavy modulation sound, especially with delays, because for whatever reason, maybe it's because of the placement of my hand when I play, but you can clearly hear the notes so pristinely when you play any kind of effect that has like a delay to it. Now compare that with right. It sounds a little lower, sounds a little bit more muffled. Sounds good when you're probably listening to it on headphones, but in a live environment where there's already like, how do I say, not the ideal acoustic situation, you want the notes to ring out, especially if you're carrying that harmonic information and frequency for the group. That out of phase kind of thin sound, never really a fan personally. There's that high sound, but also with like the fullness, that bottom end. And if you go to this position, one position down, a little bit more ice picky on the top end, not a fan. Not bad, it's just not what we want to hear. And then if you go to the bridge, I mean, you prepare yourself. You get the idea. We don't need to hear that. And again, yeah, you could play around with your effects and your settings and all that stuff. Maybe make it a little less high-endy as well. I'm pretty sure it's not the wiring on this guitar, because I've had this guitar set up plenty of times and the wiring has been looked at. It's perfect. It sounds great. It's just that it's lacking for me. But it speaks to the beautiful balance of the Fender Strat. That the middle position pickup is literally the Goldilocks pickup. It's not too low, it's not too bright, it's just right. Another thing that was interesting that I realized about this guitar is that it has a very unique sound when it comes to handling distortion. Check it out. My whole thing with the Strat is that, this Strat in particular, is that it doesn't have enough crunch on the distortion for my taste. If you go on the complete neck, sounds a little too thin and stringy. The out of phase positions, even thinner, in my opinion. Middle, like in my opinion, it's usable, it's good. I also did a lot of experimenting with this guitar. I had 10s on these, and I now play 11s on these. I experimented with the bridge position in terms of its functionality. I think the best configuration, in my opinion, for a Strat is to have it set up the way I set up my Squire, where it's completely flat on its back. The bridge is completely flat on the body. That one has 11s though, but I'd probably put 10s on these for some reason, because I just think 10s work better than 11s on this guitar, in my opinion. But another effect that I played live with this guitar that always cut through perfectly was, again, middle position. One thing I can tell you for sure that I will not miss is soloing on this guitar. It was not fun, it was not easy. Because again, like I said, the guitar itself, the neck is thinner than I'd like. I got these ham hocks. I need I need something substantial to work with them. And whenever I tried soloing with this guitar, it just felt so cramped. Add to the fact that I have 11s and it's a floating kind of bridge setup, so the tension's a lot higher than it probably even needs to be. But it just made things like so much harder to do, especially for a solo like vice grip. Pick up all day, baby. So yeah, that's the story of why I'm selling this guitar. Do you have a guitar that you are looking to sell or maybe considering selling? Why? Why would you do this to yourself? Explain yourself in the comments down below. Like this video and subscribe for more sad boy content just like this. Say goodbye, guys. Bye. Later. Bye.